Today, we are peering behind the curtain of some pretty intense celebrity legal drama. And the scene, well, it's set way out in the mountains of Utah. We're tackling a high-stakes, multi-million-dollar legal battle. It involves one of the music industry's most recognizable figures right now, Post Malone.
That's absolutely right. And, when you look at Post Malone currently, it seems like everything's just going up and up for him. He's opening his own bar in Nashville. He's set to headline huge festivals like Stagecoach 2026. I mean, he really embodies success.
Yeah, totally.
But underneath that shiny surface, there's this new and pretty serious legal complaint. It was filed recently in Utah's 4th District Court. And it basically argues that his success came, well, partly at the expense of someone who helped him build that very image he's selling.
And this isn't just, a minor disagreement. This is serious stuff. Our mission today is to take this stack of legal filings you sent over and really unpack the claims, the staggering financial demands, and honestly, the almost unbelievable story around the main plaintiff here. A teacher who also drives a limo part-time. It really feels like a classic David versus Goliath situation, doesn't it? Where the David is basically demanding compensation for what his lawyers say was a crucial but completely uncredited role in a huge music video.
The contrast is really the engine driving this whole lawsuit. It's striking. On one side, you've got the star power, right? Post Malone, his collaborator, Tyla Yaweh, and then the massive corporate machine of Sony Music Entertainment.
The big guns.
Exactly. And then on the other side, the plaintiff, Larry Deuel. And the documents describe him not as, a professional actor or anything, but just as a dedicated high school teacher. Drives a limo on the side to make ends meet.
Right. And before we dive into all the specifics, we have to start with the number, the figure that just, it stops you in your tracks. The demand for damages in this lawsuit starts at a minimum of $10 million.
$10 million. It's a jaw-dropping figure. It really is, especially when you think about the plaintiff's role, which seems relatively small on the surface. But that number tells you immediately this isn't just about getting paid for a few hours of work.
No way.
This is aimed squarely at what they see as intentional deception, unauthorized commercial exploitation of his identity. It's a claim that signals Deuel and his legal team are ready to argue alleged fraud in front of a jury.
Okay, let's really unpack this. That we need to follow the timeline. So let's dive into the inciting incident, a ride to the ranch. This whole thing really springs from just one day. Back in 2020. Can you set the scene for us? What was the context?
Sure. So the timeline puts us squarely in 2020. They were filming the music video for the song Tommy Lee, which was a pretty major collaboration, for both Post Malone and Tyla Yaweh.
Right, I remember that track.
And the location was key. They chose Malone's own ranch, this sprawling, kind of secluded place in Utah. That setting immediately gave the video this exclusive high-end feel,
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did Larry Deuel, the teacher, the limo driver, the guy now suing for $10 million.
Yeah.
How did he initially get pulled into this very exclusive celebrity project?
Well, originally, he was just brought in as a service provider, purely functional role. Deuel was hired through his part-time business, just for transportation, simple chauffeuring services.
Okay.
His job was to drive the artists, their team, around this remote ranch location where they were filming, just the logistics, really. Getting people in these fancy cars where they needed to be.
But that role changed pretty quickly, didn't it? It seems like the line blurred between him being just the driver and suddenly being on-screen talent. And this seems to be the moment the lawyers are pointing to as the critical point.
Yeah.
How did it escalate according to the lawsuit anyway?
Yeah, that's exactly what the documents allege. They claim that once everyone got to the ranch, the artists or someone on their team saw an opportunity. Maybe they decided to change things up on the fly.
Spontaneously.
Apparently. They allegedly approached Deuel and asked him to step outside his normal driving duties. They wanted him to actually be in the video shoot itself, performing specific actions on camera right there next to a luxury limo.
Okay. And moving from just driving to actually performing, well, that needs a whole new agreement, right? But the lawsuit says this agreement was just verbal and pretty vague. What was the specific promise they allegedly made to him? The one that forms the basis of this whole contract claim?
Well, the alleged promise was simple, almost casual, you could say, but legally potentially very tricky. The artists, or maybe their reps on set, supposedly assured Deuel that he would be taken care of for his extra time and participation.
Taken care of. That sounds open to interpretation.
It does. But in that kind of environment, a high-budget music video production, that phrase, taken care of, is generally understood to mean money, compensation. And probably, pretty decent compensation given the scale of everything. Deuel claims he agreed to perform based specifically on that promise of future payment.
And that casual verbal assurance, which probably seemed like no big deal at the time,
Right.
is now the absolute bedrock of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Because the crucial piece of paper, the talent release form, never got signed.
Precisely. That's the linchpin. In the entertainment world, especially for music videos backed by a major label like Sony, getting a signed release form is standard operating procedure. It's vital for anyone who appears recognizably on camera, even for a second.
You'd think that would be automatic.
You would. And the failure to get that signed document from Deuel, especially after making a verbal promise about payment, well, that exposed the artist, the production, and the label to potentially huge liability.
Okay, so that brings us to the full scope of who's actually being sued here. Who exactly are the defendants named in this complaint, filed in Utah's 4th District Court?
They've cast a pretty wide net. It's not just the artists who allegedly made the promise, Post Malone and Tyla Yaweh.
Right.
Critically, it also includes Sony Music Entertainment, the corporate giant, the one responsible for distributing the video, marketing it, making money off it.
Following the money.
Exactly. And the complaint also lists others, which is typical legal language to cover potentially other parties involved, like maybe the production company or management teams who were there on set.
And including Sony. That's a classic legal move, isn't it? It signals this isn't just about, say, a few $1,000s in unpaid wages.
Absolutely. It shows they're going after the entity with the deepest pockets. They're arguing Sony benefited commercially from the alleged wrongdoing, so Sony should be held responsible too. Which leads us right into the next part. Section 2. The core claims and legal framework.
Right. Let's shift from the story of what happened to the actual legal strategy now. Because Deuel's lawyers didn't just file one simple claim, did they? They threw a whole basket of claims at the defendants.
That's right. It's a multi-pronged attack, really. They're coming at it from different angles: contract law, issues of intent, and even property rights related to his image.
Okay, so let's start with the main problem, the central grievance here. It seems like it has two parts. He didn't get paid, and they didn't have permission to use his image.
Exactly. The absolute core is, first, he did what they asked him to do on camera. He's clearly visible in this big budget video, and yet he got paid. Zero. Nothing.
Simple non-payment.
Simple non-payment. But second, and this is legally even more significant, is the claim that he never signed a release form. He never gave them permission in writing to use his name, his image, his likeness, what lawyers call NIL.
NIL.
The second they put that video out commercially, featuring his image without that signed paper, that's when the door opened wide for the kind of massive liability claim we're seeing now.
Got it. So let's break down the four main legal claims they're making. First up, the most straightforward one. They didn't follow through on that verbal promise.
That's breach of contract. It's the simplest foundation for the lawsuit. It rests directly on that alleged promise to take care of him. The lawsuit just says, look, you made an oral agreement to pay him for his performance on set, and you didn't do it.
Seems pretty clear-cut if they can prove the promise was made.
Right, but breach of contract alone usually just gets you compensatory damages, basically, what you should have been paid. It typically doesn't get you into the multi-million-dollar range they're asking for here.
Okay, so to get to those huge punitive damages, the $7.5 million part, they need to prove something more sinister, like intent. Which brings us to the second claim, the one that sounds much more serious. The accusation that the artist actually lied to him, that they never planned to pay him at all.
And that's fraudulent inducement. This claim really ups the ante. It alleges intentional wrongdoing, not just, forgetting to pay someone or sloppy paperwork. The legal documents are quite explicit. They state, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, that defendants Post Malone and Tyla Yaweh never intended to compensate Mr. Deuel when they induced him to perform with their false representation.
Wow. But proving someone's intent, what they were thinking at the time, that's notoriously difficult in court, isn't it? How do his lawyers plan to convince a jury of that?
It is a high bar, no doubt. They'll likely argue that the complete failure to pay him anything over the 5 years since the video came out, despite its huge success, shows a pattern of bad faith. It suggests, they'll argue, that the initial promise was just a lie told to manipulate him into performing without hassle.
So the argument is, their later actions reveal their earlier intent.
Essentially, yes. For fraudulent inducement, you generally need to prove a few things. That a false statement of fact was made, the promise to pay. That it was made knowingly or recklessly, they knew they wouldn't pay, with the intent to deceive. And that the plaintiff, Mr. Deuel, reasonably relied on that false promise to his detriment. He performed because he thought he'd be paid. If a jury buys the idea that the artist just used that vague phrase to bypass dealing with a proper contract, that could meet the intent requirement, and that could unlock those massive punitive damages.
Okay, that makes the stakes incredibly high for Post Malone and Tyla Yaweh personally, not just Sony. What's the third claim? This one seems focused on the benefit the defendants got from his unpaid work.
That one is unjust enrichment. This is more about fairness or equity, as lawyers say. The argument is pretty simple. The defendants made a lot of money and gained significant commercial benefit, millions of views, streams, downloads, all leading to revenue from a video that prominently featured his image and his performance.
Yeah, you got nothing for it.
Exactly. So they were unjustly enriched at his expense. The argument is they should have to pay back the value of that benefit they received because of him. It's about preventing them from profiting from an unfair situation.
Right. And the final claim. This one seems like a direct hit on his personal rights, his identity.
This is the really crucial one, misappropriation of name and likeness, the NIL claim again. This claim asserts they illegally used his identity, his image, for their commercial profit without getting his consent through that signed release form.
And how do they define that legally in the lawsuit?
To give it legal weight, the lawsuit actually quotes the legal standard for NIL claims. It says the use must be an appropriation of another's name or likeness that has some intrinsic value, and it has to be for the use or benefit of the defendant.
Okay, that phrase intrinsic value seems really important here, especially for Deuel. He's not a celebrity, right? His name alone doesn't carry millions in value. So his lawyers have to argue that his performance in the video itself had real inherent commercial value for the defendants.
Exactly. And that takes us right into the next section, which is fascinating. Section 3. The argument for Deuel's crucial value. This is where the legal filing almost reads like a piece of film criticism, weirdly enough. The lawyers had to build a strong case for why this $10 million demand isn't totally outrageous. They had to argue that the limo driver wasn't just some random extra, but was actually vital to the video's success.
So how do they describe what he actually did in the video? How do they elevate his role from just being the driver in the background to an essential performer?
They get very specific in the documents. They meticulously detail his actions on camera. They point out he wasn't just standing around. He was actively visible, performing professional duties associated with high-end luxury service.
Like what specifically?
Things like rolling out an actual red carpet from the limo onto the ground, opening the luxury car door multiple times for Tyla Yaweh, and standing there prominently next to the car during key moments when Yaweh is rapping about, wealth and success. He's a silent character, but a very visible one.
Okay, I can picture that. But why do the lawyers insist his role was crucial? Not just, a nice touch, but actually essential.
The argument is all about the theme.
Yeah.
The plaintiff's lawyers argue the whole point of the Tommy Lee video was to project this image of unlimited wealth, fame, privilege, power, and success.
Right, the rock star lifestyle.
Exactly. And they claim Deuel's presence, specifically him performing those traditional formal service actions, the chauffeuring, the red carpet, was essential to actually sell that theme, to make it believable. He provided the visual contrast, the hired help serving the kings. That contrast, they argue, demonstrated the level of privilege the artists were claiming.
Okay, I see the argument. And this leads to what might be the most memorable line in the entire lawsuit. It's almost funny, but also incredibly pointed. They use this really specific and kind of unflattering comparison to argue why the limo driver's professional look was so necessary.
Oh yeah, it's a phenomenal bit of legal writing. It uses dramatic irony perfectly. To hammer home the intrinsic value of Deuel's polished professional role, the lawsuit basically contrasts him with what the main stars were doing. I have to quote this directly from the documents, it's too good. Absent Mr. Deuel's presence in Tommy Lee, the theme of wealth, power, fame, privilege, and success would have been visually underwhelming, supported only by two unkempt musicians smoking blunts riding ATVs in a dirt field.
Wow, visually underwhelming. And unkempt musicians smoking blunts riding ATVs in a dirt field. That's savage.
It is, but it's also brilliant legal strategy.
How so?
Because it directly counters the likely defense argument that Deuel's image as a non-celebrity had no real commercial value on its own. The lawyers are essentially saying, no, his specific performance, his professional demeanor, single-handedly elevated the production. It saved your video from looking cheap or just, underwhelming.
So the argument becomes, your entire image of high-end success in this video actually depended on our client performing his role professionally.
A role you then didn't pay him for and didn't get permission to use commercially.
Right, and if that image was key to the video getting millions of views, then his image did have intrinsic value in that specific context.
Exactly. They're legally framing it so his value is tied directly to the video's core theme and subsequent success.
And speaking of success, what were the numbers? How commercially successful was this video that allegedly exploited his image? Give us the scale.
Oh, the scale is immense. And that's obviously crucial for justifying the $10 million demand. The official Tommy Lee music video, just on YouTube alone, has racked up over 97 million views.
97 million, wow.
Yeah. And on YouTube, it got more than 23,840 comments and over 1 million likes. And that's just YouTube, right? The lawsuit points out this translates to millions more streams and downloads across all the other platforms, Spotify, YouTube Music, SoundCloud, you name it.
So the lawsuit connects those huge numbers directly back to Deuel.
By arguing that the value derived from his performance, his image, was essentially exploited hundreds of millions of times across all those views and streams, providing, as the lawsuit puts it, immense commercial benefit to all the defendants, Malone, Yaweh, and very importantly, Sony Music.
And that connection is the strategic key, isn't it?
It's the linchpin. Because, the argument goes, Deuel still legally owns the rights to his own image in that video because there's no signed release. His lawyers argue he's therefore legally entitled to a cut of the massive profits generated from its use. If a jury accepts that his image was indeed crucial for selling the video's theme, then using it without permission or payment constitutes enormous commercial exploitation.
Okay, this makes sense. So let's move into Section 4. Damages and failed resolution attempts. We know the headline figure is $10 million. But it's important to break down how they actually arrive at that number illegally. It says a lot about how serious they are.
Absolutely. The structure of the demand is very strategic. That $10 million isn't just one lump sum. It's basically divided into two main categories, compensation and punishment.
Okay, so starting with the part that represents the actual value of his lost wages, or the use of his likeness, the compensatory part.
Right. That's what they list as principal damages. And they define that as not less than $2,500,000. $2.5 million. This is the core figure that represents, in their view, the commercial value of using his image without permission, the breach of the payment promise, and the overall injury to his rights. It's essentially what they argue he should have been paid, or the value his image contributed.
Okay. But $2.5 million is a long way from $10 million. The vast majority of the demand is clearly aimed elsewhere. It's about punishment.
Exactly. That's the punitive damages portion, demanding not less than $7,500,000. $7.5 million just in punitive damages. And this is tied directly to that really aggressive claim of fraudulent inducement.
The claim that they intentionally lied to him.
Precisely. Punitive damages aren't meant to just compensate the victim for their loss. They exist to punish the wrongdoer for really bad behavior, intentional malice, recklessness, or fraud. And they're also meant to deter others, especially big companies and celebrities, from doing the same kind of thing in the future.
And the fact that the punitive amount is 3 times the principal amount. What does that signal?
It signals just how strongly Deuel's legal team believes they can prove that the artists acted in deliberate bad faith when they allegedly made that verbal promise on set. They're betting heavily on the fraud angle.
Okay. There are also costs for the lawyers mentioned and something else about profits.
Yeah, there are a couple more pieces. Attorney fees are listed as not less than $25,000, which is pretty standard. But then there's a really interesting and potentially complicated demand for profit disgorgement.
Profit disgorgement. What exactly does that mean?
It's a complex legal remedy, but basically it means he wants the defendants to legally hand over or disgorge the profits they made specifically from using his image without his consent.
Whoa. How on earth do you even calculate the profit generated specifically by his image in a music video with 97 million views? That sounds impossible.
That is the huge challenge, and where the legal battle could get really messy if it goes that far. The lawsuit demands the defendants turn over all their financial records showing the revenue generated by the video.
Okay.
Now, the defendants will almost certainly argue that Deuel's part was tiny, maybe worth a fraction of a % of the total profit, if anything. But Deuel's lawyers leaning hard on that visually underwhelming argument.
Right, the idea that he was essential.
They'll claim his contribution was actually substantial. They'll try to link a significant portion of the monetary value from those 97 million views directly back to his unpaid, unauthorized performance. It becomes as much an accounting fight as a legal one.
Fascinating. And the decision to request a jury trial, that's also a key strategic choice here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Deuel has formally requested a trial by jury. Think about the optics. You have this story of A powerful, wealthy celebrity versus a regular guy, a high school teacher driving a limo part-time. Presenting that narrative to a jury of ordinary citizens rather than just a judge who might be more focused purely on legal technicalities, well, that often gives the plaintiff, the David in this scenario, a strategic advantage. It definitely increases the pressure on the celebrity side to settle the case before it gets to a jury.
Right. Now, this lawsuit was filed recently, but the incident happened back in 2020. Did this dispute just suddenly appear, or had Deuel been trying to resolve this for a while?
According to the legal documents, this has been brewing for years. It wasn't an immediate jump to a lawsuit. Deuel claims he made numerous attempts over the past 5 years to sort out the compensation issue directly with the defendants or their representatives. He apparently tried to handle it without resorting to litigation, which is costly and public.
And the lawsuit includes a story about a very recent attempt to resolve it, right? Something that paints the defendant side as pretty dismissive. What happened there?
Yeah, the lawsuit details a very specific and quite dramatic incident involving trying to serve legal papers. This allegedly happened on August 8th, 2025. Deuel's lawyers tried to have a letter delivered, presumably outlining the claims and formally initiating the service process directly to Post Malone. The documents allege that when the constable, the legal officer, attempted to deliver the papers, Post Malone's security detail reacted with, well, extreme disrespect. The lawsuit claims the security team laughed at the constable and then flat out refused to accept service of the legal documents.
Oh, that does not look good.
Yeah.
Laughing at a constable and refusing service. That plays right into the narrative Deuel's lawyers are building, doesn't it? The idea of arrogance, of disregard.
It's terrible optics for the defense, whether the specific allegation is fully accurate or not. In a lawsuit where you're already being accused of exploiting someone seen as an ordinary working person, having your highly paid security team allegedly mark a legal officer and refuse service, that provides powerful ammunition for Deuel's argument. It supports their claim that the defendants basically thought they were above it all, that they didn't have to pay or even acknowledge their obligations. It feeds the idea that they weren't going to take him seriously until he hit them with a very public $10 million lawsuit.
So, given that the lawsuit was filed on October 17th, and this involves huge names, what's the current status? Has there been any public response from Post Malone or Tyla Yaweh or Sony?
Well, based on the sources we've reviewed up to this point, no. Neither Post Malone nor Tyla Yaweh nor any official reps from Sony Music appear to have made any public comments specifically about this lawsuit yet. We're still in the very early stages. The defense is undoubtedly formulating their response right now. We can probably expect them to file motions soon, likely trying to get some of these claims dismissed, especially that tricky, fraudulent inducement claim.
This whole case is really quite something. It's almost a perfect case study for understanding how much value can be placed on intellectual property rights, even for what seems like a minor appearance in commercial media.
It really is. This deep dive offers some profound lessons, I think, especially about the operational risks involved in these big budget productions. It just hammers home the point that the cost of getting a signed name, image, and likeness release, which is basically just a piece of paper, is infinitely smaller than the potential cost of a $10 million lawsuit popping up 5 years down the line.
Absolutely. And for you, the listener, this case gives you a really clear, high-stakes example of how lawyers strategically bundle different legal claims together. We've seen how they can use something relatively simple like breach of contract as the foundation, but then layer on much more aggressive claims like fraudulent inducement and misappropriation of likeness to go after those huge punitive damages and try to claw back profits.
And these laws, like NIL rights and fraud statutes, they really are vital protections. They exist to ensure that individuals, like Mr. Deuel in this case, who might feel pressured or perhaps are taken advantage of with just a quick verbal promise on a busy set, that they have some recourse when a large corporation then turns around and uses their identity to generate millions, potentially, in streams and views without following through on compensation or getting the proper permissions.
We kick this off by noting that powerful line from the plaintiff's lawyers, that without the limo driver, the video's whole theme of success and luxury would have been visually underwhelming.
Yeah, and that really raises a final kind of provocative thought to leave people with. Think about it. If a major record label like Sony, a multi-platinum artist like Post Malone, and this high-budget music video, the very picture of unlimited wealth, fame, privilege, and power, if they were apparently so dependent on the unpaid, unauthorized contribution of a part-time limo driver just to achieve their main aesthetic goal, What does that really say about the true, perhaps hidden costs of manufacturing that image of effortless luxury? And maybe about the enormous legal risks they were willing to gamble on just to cut one small corner on a single talent release form?
Indeed. It seems like the visual support was deemed crucial, but perhaps the legal support wasn't given the same attention. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.